Tessa, I've handed everything over to your brother. You're out. For a split second, I thought I'd misheard him. Those words sounded alien, like something from someone else's nightmare, not mine. I gripped my phone tighter, feeling betrayal slice through me sharper than I expected. My father's voice was unnervingly calm, too calm, as if he wasn't tearing apart everything I'd spent my life building in a single breath, as if the past 2 decades meant absolutely nothing. I forced down the lump swelling in my throat outside my office window, the cityscape blurred as my mind spun, trying to process what this meant. The empire we'd constructed together, the one I had sacrificed so much for, was suddenly not mine anymore. For years, I'd believed I was the backbone of Mitchell Enterprises, that my father saw me as his equal, the one destined to carry on our legacy. I was wrong. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, my voice unnervingly steady. On the other end, I heard my father hesitate. He'd expected a different reaction, a scream, a plea, maybe even a fight. But I gave him nothing. "Tessa, I know this seems unfair, but—" I cut him off by hanging up. The silence that followed filled my office like a weight, suffocating and heavy, heavier than anything I'd ever faced before. Then, something inside me shifted. I took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying the fire that was rising within me. He thinks this is the end. He's wrong. Mitchell Enterprises was more than just a company. It was my father's dream and my entire world. I'd been there from the start, side by side with him as we clawed our way up from nothing. At 19, I officially joined the business. While my father had the vision, I was the one who made it scalable. I developed our investment strategies, grew our portfolio, and pulled us back from financial disasters more times than I can count. Yet, over the past year, things changed. My father began shutting me out of important meetings. Financial reports stopped showing up on my desk. Behind closed doors, decisions were being made by my brother, Liam. Liam, the golden child, the son my father had always wanted. While I spent my 20s locked in boardrooms and investor meetings, Liam wasted his in nightclubs and luxury resorts, blowing through trust fund money like it would never run out. He never cared about the business, never earned his place. But somehow, my father had chosen him over me. I should have seen it coming. The missing reports, the whispered talks between my father and his lawyers, Liam's sudden interest in the company after years of ignoring it. I'd been too trusting, too caught up in running the company to notice the ground shifting beneath me. And now, they thought they'd taken everything. I stared down at the mahogany desk, my fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the polished surface. My mind was already racing, sorting through years of contracts, legal frameworks, and backup plans. What my father didn't realize, what Liam didn't understand, was that I'd never been naive in this game. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the black notebook I kept hidden. Inside were the true records, separate from the official books. Every major decision, every hidden liability, every backroom deal my father had made. If he thought he could shove me out and walk away unscathed, he'd seriously underestimated me. I'd built this company with my blood, sweat, and sacrifices. I knew every weak point, every pressure spot. And I wasn't about to let them win. Leaning back in my chair, I gazed out at the city skyline. This was where my father had made his second mistake, assuming I would break. I wasn't mourning the loss. I was gearing up for battle. Glancing once more at my phone, I stood up and adjusted the sleeves of my blazer. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. I left the office early that day, not because I was overwhelmed or needed time to process, but because I needed space to think. The truth was, I'd already seen this coming. I drove in silence, clutching the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The streets of Austin blurred past, a city where I'd spent years making my mark, now feeling colder, different. My father had cut me out. Liam had won. Or at least, that's what they thought. I pulled into my driveway, shut off the engine, and just stayed put for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me. The house felt empty, because it was empty. I'd never made time to build a life beyond the company. While my friends were getting married, having kids, going on vacations, I was grinding through 16-hour days, fighting to keep Mitchell Enterprises from collapsing under the weight of my father's outdated methods. And now, I had nothing to show for it. Or at least, that's what they wanted me to believe. I tossed my keys onto the counter as I stepped inside and headed straight to the study. The walls, lined with books on business strategy and negotiation, the very things I dedicated myself to, felt useless tonight. Instead, I reached for the one thing I could always count on: my notebook. Flipping it open, I scanned the pages filled with years of notes, deals my father had made, secret accounts, things he'd never thought I'd catch. I knew his weaknesses. If he'd taught me anything, it was that power doesn't belong to the one with the biggest empire. It belongs to whoever knows how to burn it all down. I thought back to my childhood, to how my father preached loyalty and family, raising me on stories about grit, perseverance, and earning your place in this world. And yet, when it came down to it, he'd handed everything over to Liam, the son who'd never earned it. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect. And my father had made one critical error: underestimating me. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found the name I needed: Ethan Carter, my father's oldest friend, the man who helped him secure the very first funding round when Mitchell Enterprises was just a scribble on a bar napkin. Ethan was one of the few people who had always believed in me more than my own father ever did. I pressed call. "Tessa," he answered right away, his voice warm but cautious. "It's been a while." "We need to meet," I said, cutting straight to it. "It's about my father." There was a pause, then a sigh. I figured something was up. "Meet me at the club in an hour." I hung up and grabbed my keys. If my father rewrote the rules, then I'd rewrite them too. The private club looked just like I remembered, full of old money men who'd built empires the way my father had. Ethan sat in the back, nursing a whiskey, his eyes watching me approach with the same sharp calculation he always had. "So," he said, swirling his glass, "tell me what happened." I didn't hold back. I told him everything: the call, the betrayal, the way my father handed Liam an empire he didn't deserve. Ethan listened, nodding here and there, but never losing his serious expression. "And what do you want from me?" he finally asked. I leaned in, locking eyes with him. "I want to build something better. And I want my father and Liam to realize exactly what they lost." He studied me a moment, then chuckled. "Your father always said you had his ruthlessness." "Then you know I'm not going to lose." He nodded slowly. "Okay, Tessa. What's the plan?" I exhaled, feeling the fire inside me blaze brighter than ever. My father had taken everything from me. Now it was my turn. Ethan leaned back, eyes sharp and calculating. The same look he'd had when evaluating business deals for decades. His silence wasn't doubt. It was strategy. I'd seen that look before, back when he and my father were partners. "You know," he said, swirling the ice in his glass, "your father would call this betrayal." I let out a dry laugh. "Funny. I thought betrayal was cutting your own daughter out of the company she helped build." Ethan smirked. "Touché." I folded my hands calmly on the table. "I'm not here just for revenge, Ethan. I want to create something better, something that makes Mitchell Enterprises look like a footnote." He nodded slowly, setting down his drink. "All right then, let's talk strategy." After years in business, I'd learned power doesn't come from owning something, it comes from controlling it. And despite what my father believed, I still controlled far more than he realized. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through notes. "Right now, Mitchell Enterprises has a major weakness: expansion. The company's over-leveraged. My father and Liam have been throwing money at acquisitions, thinking they can outgrow the market, but they lack the infrastructure to support it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. How do you know that? Because I built the infrastructure. I met his gaze. I know exactly where the cracks are, and if those cracks widen even a bit, the whole thing falls apart. Ethan chuckled low. So you're not going to confront them head on. You're going to let them collapse themselves. Exactly. Mitchell Enterprises spent the last year diving into real estate, manufacturing, and supply chain logistics investments. But my father and Liam weren't visionaries. They didn't understand the industries they were buying into. They acted on blind ambition and arrogance, thinking their name alone guaranteed success. It didn't. And when Mitchell Enterprises starts to struggle? Ethan asked, a knowing smile creeping across his face. That's when I make my move. Revenge wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to prove I wasn't some disposable asset my father could toss aside. I wanted them to see cutting me out was the worst mistake they ever made. I needed funding. Real, substantial funding. I needed resources that could give me an edge. But above all else, I needed the right people by my side. I want to start my own firm, I told Ethan, my voice steady with determination. Something lean and strategic, focused on acquisitions that actually make sense, deals that bring value instead of just grabbing flashy headlines. And I want to recruit the best talent from Mitchell Enterprises, the people who truly keep it running. Ethan laughed and shook his head, a mixture of admiration and disbelief in his eyes. You really are your father's daughter, he said. I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. No, I replied quietly but firmly. I'm better. I had spent years inside Mitchell Enterprises, building the strongest teams and mentoring the sharpest minds. They trusted me deeply. Liam? Not so much. And if it came down to making a choice, I was certain where their loyalty would lie. Ethan leaned forward, a spark of interest flashing in his eyes. Let me guess. You already have names lined up. I slid my phone across the polished table. On the screen was a carefully curated list of executives, project managers, financial analysts, the real backbone of Mitchell Enterprises. These are the people who keep the company alive and thriving, I said, my voice low but confident. And I guarantee you, at least half of them would leave in a heartbeat if presented with the right opportunity. Ethan whistled softly, impressed. You don't waste time, do you? I shook my head. I don't have time to waste. He leaned back, weighing the proposition. All right, Tessa, I'm in. Those 3 words were all I needed. Within just a week, I had secured initial funding. Ethan connected me with investors eager to back anyone willing to challenge Mitchell Enterprises, especially someone who understood exactly how to dismantle it from within. The first call I made was to Danielle Carter, the head of risk management and someone who had been my mentor for years. She knew exactly what I'd built and what had been taken from me. Tessa, she answered on the first ring, her voice filled with anger and disbelief. I heard what happened. It's absolute bullshit. I'm starting something new, I said firmly, and I want you with me. There was a brief pause on the line. Then she responded with quiet resolve. Tell me where to sign. Piece by piece, the plan started to take shape. By the end of the week, 4 key people had joined my team. By the end of the month, that number grew to 10. And the best part? My father didn't have a clue. They thought I'd fade away, disappear quietly. They were wrong. Sitting in my new office, I stared down at the official incorporation papers for my firm. Mitchell Enterprises had taken everything from me, but I'd built something better, a leaner, smarter, more agile company. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my father's contact. For a moment, I considered calling him, telling him exactly what I was about to unleash. But then I smiled to myself and put the phone down. He'd find out soon enough. The first domino was falling. In the weeks that followed, the momentum I had built grew unstoppable. More and more people left Mitchell Enterprises, some quietly slipping away, others making a dramatic exit, but all driven by the same goal: to work with me. I never had to poach aggressively. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who felt overlooked, who was frustrated with Liam's reckless leadership, who wanted to escape before the entire company collapsed under its own weight. And collapse was coming. The first serious blow to Mitchell Enterprises came from a disastrous acquisition deal. For months, the company had been negotiating to acquire Harlan Tech, a mid-sized logistics firm that would have expanded their grip on supply chain operations. It was a high-stakes move, one I had originally led before being cut out. But Liam had taken over negotiations, and he utterly botched it. The headlines came fast. Mitchell Enterprises fumbles key acquisition as CEO's son mismanages deal. Harlan Tech walks away, citing leadership concerns at Mitchell Enterprises. I read every article with a quiet, simmering satisfaction. Liam had overpromised, miscalculated badly, and ultimately pushed Harlan Tech into a deal with a rival firm, one I had personally advised on, a firm now fully aligned with me. It wasn't enough to destroy Mitchell Enterprises. Not yet. But it was the first clear public crack in their foundation. I knew my father was watching every moment unfold. The call I expected came 2 days after the Harlan Tech fiasco. My phone buzzed while I was deep in my own expansion plans. Dad. I let it ring, then picked up just as voicemail was about to kick in. Tessa. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the tension beneath the surface. I assume you've seen the news. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, confident smile spreading across my lips. I have. A long pause. Did you have something to do with this? I exhaled softly, letting the silence stretch between us. Dad, I said finally, you made it very clear I was out. Why would I involve myself with Mitchell Enterprises? He sighed, the weight of everything pressing down on him. We need to talk. The first hint of regret in his voice, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I'm busy, I said smoothly. You'll have to find another time. Before he could respond, I ended the call. And for the first time in my life, I was the one walking away from him. I wasn't the only one enjoying the show. That evening, I got a text from Danielle, my mentor and closest ally. Liam's losing it. He called an emergency meeting today, blaming internal sabotage. People are starting to question if he even knows what he's doing. I smirked. Of course Liam was panicking. He had never handled pressure well, and now, with the press scrutinizing him, investors getting nervous, and key employees walking away, he was drowning. And I wasn't done yet. I wasn't just aiming at Liam. I was going straight for my father's legacy. Mitchell Enterprises was more than a business. It was an institution, a monument built over decades on my father's reputation and his uncanny ability to convince everyone that the Mitchells never fail. But now, that reputation was crumbling beneath their feet. All I had to do was let the weight of their own mistakes drag them down. So, I made my next move. I called Ethan. It's time, I told him, voice steady with resolve. Are you sure? He asked, a hint of caution in his tone. Liam's already cracking, I said. My father is starting to doubt him. Investors are nervous, second-guessing everything. If we strike now, we can swoop in and snatch some of their biggest contracts before they even realize what's happening. Ethan chuckled low, impressed. You really are ruthless, Tessa. I smiled, cold and sharp. I learned from the best. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. The next phase was straightforward. Destabilize Mitchell Enterprises further, secure critical contracts before they could, and watch my father come to terms with exactly what he had done. For years, I had been the perfect daughter, the loyal heir quietly strategizing behind the scenes. Not anymore. Now, I was ready to watch everything burn. Liam was drowning, and I was the one holding the lifeline out of reach. From a distance, I watched as Mitchell Enterprises, once a powerhouse, once my legacy, began to unravel under his incompetence. At first, it was subtle, a missed deadline here, an underperforming quarter there, but then it spiraled out of control, and I made sure to speed up the process. After the Harland tech deal collapsed, Mitchell Enterprises lost more than just a business acquisition. They lost credibility. Investors weren't just uneasy anymore, they were downright scared. Then came the exodus. At first, it was a handful of executives, the very ones I had personally recruited to join my new firm. But soon, the floodgates opened wide. Key managers walked out, the people who kept the company alive. Clients hesitated. Contracts once considered guaranteed suddenly went unsigned. Investors started calling my father directly, demanding explanations. The best part? I hadn't lifted a finger. Liam was destroying the company all on his own. The second call from my father came late one night. I was in my office, reviewing a contract for my firm's latest acquisition. Ironically, a client that had once been Mitchell Enterprises' crown jewel. The irony wasn't lost on me. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering. "Dad." His voice was different this time, not angry or arrogant, but desperate. "Tessa, listen. We need to talk in person." I leaned back in my chair, fingers drumming on my desk. "What for?" A pause, then a heavy sigh. "Liam's struggling. The board is worried. There are serious financial issues we need to address." Financial issues. That was putting it lightly. The truth was that Mitchell Enterprises was bleeding money. Every failed deal, every poor choice Liam made chipped away at the foundation my father had built. "And you think I can fix this?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Tessa, please." My father's voice softened, almost unfamiliar. "I know you're angry, but you're still part of this family. You've always been the smartest. We need you." There it was. For the first time in my life, my father admitted what I had always known. But it was too late. We met the next morning at his office. The tension was suffocating. Liam sat stiffly beside my father's desk, pale and stripped of his usual cocky smirk. They both knew. "Tessa," my father began, "we need to restructure the company. The losses are significant." "Define significant," I challenged, folding my arms. Another pause. Then he slid a folder across the desk. I opened it and saw the harsh truth. Mitchell Enterprises was on the brink of bankruptcy. The man who had built an empire from nothing had let it crumble in less than a year by handing it over to the wrong person. I met his eyes. "What do you want from me?" He hesitated, then quietly, almost painfully said, "Come back. Help us fix this." I could have laughed. I could have thrown the folder back and walked out, but I didn't. Instead, I let the silence linger, savoring the shift in power. Liam, the golden child, was silent. No arrogance, no entitlement, just fear. "And if I don't?" I asked, watching my father closely. He exhaled deeply. "Then we lose everything." I tapped my nails against the folder. This was the moment I had waited for. They had underestimated me, discarded me, and now they were begging for my help. "I'll think about it," I said smoothly, standing up. Liam's head snapped up. "Wait, what? Dad, she can't just—" "She can do whatever she wants," my father interrupted sharply. Liam's mouth clamped shut. I turned to leave. I had already won. The best part? They had no clue what I was planning next. I didn't go back to Mitchell Enterprises. I ignored their calls. I left their emails unanswered. I never even acknowledged the carefully worded letters my father sent, each one more desperate than the last. I let them wait. I let them wonder. And while they drowned in uncertainty, scrambling to fix their mess, I made my final move. 1 month after that meeting, the headlines broke. Mitchell Enterprises officially files for bankruptcy amid leadership crisis. The article was merciless. It laid bare every failure, the botched acquisitions, the mass departures, the fractured leadership. Liam's name was splashed across every headline as the face of the company's downfall. But what interested me most was the section about their assets. Mitchell Enterprises wasn't just collapsing, it was being sold off in pieces, and I had been waiting for this moment all along. I sat in a sleek, modern conference room, watching quietly as a team of lawyers and advisors meticulously finalized the paperwork laid out before me. The atmosphere hummed with a calm, professional efficiency, a sharp contrast to the turmoil that had consumed Mitchell Enterprises for months. My lawyer slid the final contract across the polished table toward me. "It's official," he said. "Your firm now owns Mitchell Enterprises' most valuable assets." I picked up the pen without hesitation and signed my name. Just like that, in one simple motion, I had taken everything my father had built, without him even realizing what was happening. Liam thought this was a game of power, a battle he could win by force or arrogance. My father believed he was preserving his legacy, holding on to what he'd spent decades building. But the truth was far different. They were playing checkers, while I had been playing chess all along. I didn't just take the company. I took the best clients, the most profitable divisions, and the people who had actually built the business from the ground up. What was left for them? A hollow shell, a name stripped of its value, a legacy that no longer belonged to them. I hadn't expected my father to reach out again, but when he did, I was in my office, buried in work. My assistant knocked softly. "Miss Mitchell," she said cautiously, "your father is here." I looked up from my desk, surprised. It had been weeks since I last saw him. "Send him in." When he entered, I barely recognized the man before me. He looked older, wearier, like someone who had finally come to understand just how much he had lost. He stood there for a long moment, taking in my office, my new company, my success. "You really did it," he said quietly. "I did," I replied. A long silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. "You could have helped," he said finally. "You could have come back. We could have fixed it together." I leaned back in my chair, steady and unshaken. "No, Dad. You could have fixed it, but you didn't want to. You chose Liam to be the golden child. You wanted to prove that I wasn't necessary. And now," I gestured around the room, "you finally understand what I always knew. It was never about the name. It was never about the company. It was about the people who built it." His jaw tightened, the fight draining out of him. He wanted to argue, to justify his choices, to make excuses. But he couldn't. He knew I was right. "I made a mistake," he admitted softly. For a brief moment, something flickered inside me. The daughter who had once idolized him, who wanted to forgive and believe in him again. But then I remembered how he had cast me aside, how every effort I'd made to prove myself had been met with rejection, as if I were never enough. So I stayed silent. Finally, he nodded, a quiet, resigned admission of defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my office. This time, I didn't look back. I never needed Mitchell Enterprises. I never needed my father's approval. What I needed was the freedom to build something of my own, and that's exactly what I did. Power isn't given, it's taken. And in the end, I took everything.